it's a pleasure to be virtually in Vienna and to talk about hydrogen. The story I'd like to tell you in a moment is 6-fold promises, 4 challenges, and 2 solutions. So before briefly going to the presentation, this is what I will take you through. So I will also cover, next to promises, challenges, some progress on European targets already there mentioned in the opening speech, and something on policy environment, and then conclude with some suggestions. So as presentation, I assume, will be distributed, I also leave with you possible ways to ask follow-up questions one-on-one, if you wish, via social media or email. The hydrogen market we're now has 6 great promises, and I believe, having seen who will attend today, over 100 people already online and more physically, you're well aware of some of these promises. So the supply potential globally is great. If IEA talks about 800 gigawatt electrolyzers needed, we're already on paper reaching towards that number. The governmental support is rising. There is Inflation Reduction Act, United States support scheme. In Europe, we have the targets in European legislation, the European Hydrogen Bank, small, but in potential big as the system gets proven. We see green premia becoming available, parties willing to pay more, sometimes driven by regulation, like Fit for 55, and that goes for refining. We see commercial funding getting ready. We just concluded as BCG a study interviewing global banks, and they're pitching up to be ready to spend up to 10% of their energy portfolio lending capital by 2030, when the conditions are right and there are offtakes contracts. We'll come back to that. We see technology supporting advancing. In our work, for example, we see a number of electrolyzer factories preparing to go to gigascale, and we already see companies advancing also in fuel cell space, even in Europe. And we see first giga projects progressing, and 2 most famous examples are one in Middle East, NEOM project, nearly 10 billion funded recently and progressing, also with use of European technology for electrolysis, for example. And we see H2 Green Steel in Sweden being prepared, combination of hydrogen markets linked to their industrial goods, deals like getting scrap metal in swap of hydrogen. Really interesting. So these 6 promises are out there. We do have challenges. Let's zoom in on Europe. Renewable power, a problem, and volatile pricing of natural gas. If to add on blue hydrogen, also a problem. Material infrastructure development, with a few exceptions, perhaps Netherlands backbone is an example that already started being constructed, but otherwise little yet happening if you compare it to the scale needed. Investability, we need to see that scale, and we'll show a few numbers in a moment. European rules still to be finalized. Some of them progressed, but still some to go. So where do we stand with what we promised a few years ago? It is work in progress. Yeah. So by 2024, we were hoping to have 6 gigawatt electrolyzers deployed. Well, we're roughly, according to our mathematics, and happy to take corrections to that, we're roughly at 1/3. For 2030, either measuring by REPowerEU targets or measuring by current policies, we are either at 1/3 or 10%. It's a glass half full, I would say, though. If we look to their policy that is helping to drive this, it is, in terms of traffic lights, quite green. So it's progressing. We see from left to right, if you see the value chain, production in Europe, imports, midstream, and then demand, we see a lot of positive stimulation. And we also took the liberty to add some numbers to it. For example, we anticipate that the green quota market will provide offtakes for up to 25% of REPowerEU 20 megaton target. We see in the midstream that Swedish presidency, I believe that was also mentioned in the opening speech, will be working to progress on how to facilitate infrastructure, gas grid repurposing. At the offtakes, we see targets, and even though that's not yet backed by full funding like in United States with Inflation Reduction Act, with its simple access, we do see progress on the base of those targets for offtakes. And we see countries like Germany coming up with Klimaschutzverträge, which through contracts for difference scheme may help off-takers take first steps to further start signing contracts. So where does it leave us? And having been to Austrian mountains, there are some beautiful views. This is quite a generic view. But do remember when going up those pathways, what I at least learned, and I got lost on the way because I had too many directions when I was walking around in Austrian mountains. So when preparing for this, I think focus is really important when progressing a roadmap, a role. And based on my experience, I'd like to leave you with two thoughts for discussion. One, think about the speed of demand switch locally and pick your sectors that really fit your economy. And I think it's without doubt that steel and refining could be on that short list to consider. Secondly, the market is not immediately there, but to give the confidence for investment, you have to try and think and plan together at least 5 to 10 years ahead. Longer is useful, but probably one will really get it wrong. But 5 to 10 years with current level of insights is quite feasible, particularly given policy targets. So plan infrastructure already as it was 5 to 10 years forward to give the confidence to off-takers to start thinking about switching their equipment. So demand switch and accompanying infrastructure. That's the focus I would suggest. And don't forget to think about your neighbors. Hydrogen is a global and at the very least European and regional market. Thank you for your attention, and I'm ready to take some questions.
Thank you, Mr. Rakhou. Please give him a warm round of applause here from Vienna. Thank you. Despite some minor bandwidth issues, I think we got the main messages. So thank you for the insights and for the data and your expectations. Any questions here from the audience? Okay, thank you. Do we have a mic? Hop, hop. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Renate Keplinger from the Austrian Chamber of Commerce. Thank you very much for this very interesting presentation. I was looking at the two solutions that you gave. I think we definitely agree on the infrastructure. On the first point, isn't that again the hen-egg problem? Should we build up demand or should we build up supply? And isn't it a risk for the companies to create a demand if you don't have the supply to cover it, because we will only drive up prices, which will make it even more not uneconomic.
Yeah, thank you for the questions, and vice versa, risking developing and investing in infrastructure without maybe knowing the exact demand in the future. So what's your point of view here? And are, if I may add, other regions like the United States, you have mentioned the Inflation Reduction Act. Here, is it a bit easier there because they don't rely on green hydrogen, but on blue as well?
Yeah. So let's start with sharing risk. So what you see, and we worked just in last year or so over 100 projects. What we see that our clients, global companies, they have enough supply coming up. So supply is not the problem. The key problem of the current market to take the final investment decisions on the supply side is to actually have their off-takers commit to a contract. And you see some courageous companies moving ahead. I think recently, for example, a Northwest European company, GTEC, signed for its industrial off-takers a contract with Cepsa, for example, to start taking off hydrogen after 2026. And those are, I think, good examples where you see companies moving together with suppliers. So supply is not the problem, it's really the offtake. But I agree, to mitigate supply, you need to be able to sign a contract. What you should not do is just fully take the risk for future pricing. Think in the way as industrials you used to think about natural gas contracts, where there was a price reopener, let's say every 2-3 years. So it's quite normal also to take certain contracting thinking forward in this new market. So this is on taking risk. On the second question, which was in there, should we go around infrastructure, also taking risk forward? Again, let's take an example that's already happening. So the Dutch government took the risk in backing 50% of the backbone repurposing. I mean, the cost presented after careful study was 1.5 billion, 50% was guaranteed by state. And you see that the construction and planning begun. And you're now actually seeing the market contracts being signed with, for example, with just the last week, so a number of big Spanish companies signing contracts with ports of Amsterdam and Rotterdam to start planning for bringing ammonia, including cracking into hydrogen, into Netherlands around the launch of the backbone. And they don't have yet fully firmed up offtakes, but just because infrastructure is there, also supply is starting being directed to a market. So there is practical evidence that thinking carefully about anticipating future demand pays off to start kickstarting this market. Yeah. So that's, and then on United States, is that a good system to kickstart this thing because it's so simple? Having also worked in United States, first disclaimer, if you go one level deeper, also there are some unclarities. They are still, unlike Europe, have not decided what is exactly green hydrogen in detail. Is it hour by hour matched with the power supply that is green, or can you match by year? So there are some very important details unsettled, which will decide if certain companies can access those amazing billions of funds. So it's not as great as it looks that are already finalized in the United States, but it is a very simple system once some of those important details are settled. And we do see that it's making companies move ahead with some of the projects for supply. We also see that in parallel, the United States is developing a number of hubs that we're allowed industrial clusters. Companies are preparing to move ahead. There are over 20 clusters. We're already working hard across the United States to benefit. And that together will definitely make a start for US market. So I think the European Hydrogen Bank is now being designed also as a simple initiative with a fixed, clear fee that can be taken for subsidies, for bridging the cost of the project versus the market, can really help. So I hope I answered some of your questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Stindl, the mic, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Harald Stindl, Gas Connect Austria. Hi, Erik.
Hi.
So you know it,
the idea to build a network, in advance, is this like a motorway, building a motorway and then the cars will come automatically over the years? What do you think of the idea that the Germans have, that there should be constructed with public funding a core hydrogen network, and then we just wait and see? And my second question would be that you've mentioned commercial funding. Now, in what respect was this intended? Is it for production? Is it for networks? Is it for blue hydrogen, probably? And are the banks really prepared to take the full commercial risk? So is it with state guarantee? Is it with contracts for difference? What is it really about?
Good questions. Let's start with public funding and what is happening in Germany. So last Friday, I was in Paris, where there was a meeting of Spanish, French, and German hydrogen community discussing the H2 mandate. And I also kind of listened there and was thinking about this great initiative, because also on stage it was presented. My impression from those kind of public discussions around this public fund, that at least it's not yet settled initiative, right? So it's not like, yes, this will happen. The second remark on this, I think it is very helpful to have a team that will balance and create, let's say, sort of an amortization in the first years, that we know that demand will not be as big as the infrastructure constructed, and the back end of those years. So such a scheme backed by is effectively an insurance, and we are quite comfortable to have insurances already for oil and gas markets. For example, export credit agencies for years insure oil and gas companies going out to risky countries, investing in oil and gas fields and building out infrastructure. To me, that's maybe even more riskier than knowing that hydrogen demand will come. So probably together with insurance industry and that capability, I think one could start thinking smartly about such fund as they think in Germany. I mean, I thought it was very promising also to read last week that the CEO of Allianz on social media started talking about hydrogen and how important that is. I'm hoping that that is the kind of movement we need to see, that insurers and perhaps the energy industry can start thinking together, how do we ensure that risk if it goes wrong, but effectively move the money and tariffs between the period of low revenue and high revenue that we will see. So that's on the German funding. On the commercial funding and banks, it's not without small print that banks are ready to take that risk. And indeed, key risk is they want to see is either state backing through contract for differences, or off-takers of A quality rating signing 10-year contracts. And I guess, to me, from the practice, it will need both. You will need clear incentives like Klimaschutzverträge in Germany is probably a good example that's coming up, and off-takers of premium quality moving forward. And then banks with some clear policy targets will take also some of the risk, but it's definitely not without small print. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your question. So the highways are not built yet, but there are some strategic and structural ideas how to do that. I don't know if your picture, Mr. Stindl, fits, because when you buy a motorway in Austria well enough, the people are eager to use it, of course. Yeah. The challenges, of course, in the gas infrastructure industry are quite larger here.
What is very interesting for Austria, I think, just to leave one more remark, is, I guess, about the motorway. Also think of all those passengers that pass Austria on way to Croatia. Huh? So I think it's also in hydrogen will be quite interesting to think what kind of international flows will be out there. Yeah. So my maybe last message, and that also goes to blue hydrogen question. So think beyond borders of Austria and consider, do we have enough renewable power? Probably not just to electrify. We'll need to think imports. Also, when thinking of imports, one may then need to add up the portfolio of blue hydrogen. And European Commission, I actually asked them on Friday, is blue hydrogen forbidden? When we were discussing in Paris in the workshop I mentioned. And there was a clear message. No, Erik, please, it's a misconception. Blue hydrogen is something we also want in Europe. Yeah. So with that, I would say thinking of Austrian motorways. Yes, I hope the hydrogen infrastructure in Austria will be just as smooth.
Okay, without any borders to neighboring countries. Yeah. Once more, an energy topic where we need an European view, not only on national politics here and national points of views. So thank you very much, Erik Rakhou, for your insights and for your statements. Thank you very much for the questions from the audience. Have a nice day, and we're looking forward to updating the future expectations and roadmaps, speaking of streets and of gas infrastructure, again here at the E-Control. Thank you. Bye.